I spent hours on crypto Twitter, so you don't have to. Here's what's happening. The issuer of the world's largest US dollar stablecoin is launching a US regulated version. They're leaning into this Made in America narrative. Tether is the company behind USDT. USDT is the largest US dollar stablecoin. Just behind it is USDC from Circle. Circle is now a publicly traded US company. It's long gotten a favorable look from US institutions and US-based consumers. It's gotten this favorable look because it's based in the US. And it's publicly seemed more coordinated or maybe excited about inviting in US regulators. The narrative is kind of like you can trust USDC because it's a company subject to US law, subject to US regulation. The downsides to lying or making mistakes around the reserves that back USDC would be pretty huge. The narrative is that USDT, meanwhile, has focused on a more global audience. It's been less focused on US institutions and as such, less focused on a tight connection with US regulators. But now Tether is explicitly going after a US audience, US institutions and everyday people using blockchain networks in the United States. I've talked about the Genius Act a few times. There's federal stablecoin legislation in the United States that passed last summer. Tether's USAT follows on this legislation. This new US dollar stablecoin is specifically built and marketed in line with the Genius Act regulations. Specifically, it'll be under the purview of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC. So what does all this mean? First, keep in mind that the point of stablecoins is to be stable. I don't know if this perception still exists, but there used to be this sense that stablecoins might be a good investment, like they could go up. This is not the case outright. In fact, the opposite is kind of true. When inflation causes the value of the US dollar to decline, the same is true for a stablecoin that's exactly tracking the US dollar. Simple as that. USAT, because it's a US dollar stablecoin built and marketed here in the US, is going to be backed by US dollars. If it works well, the theory is that it will remain pegged to US dollars. Second, because Tether is such a well-known stablecoin provider, because USDT is so large, I would expect there will be a lot of inflows into this new stablecoin. I don't know if it'll become as big as USDC, but this at least means there's another option that kind of seems similar in qualities to USDC from a big name issuer. Third, honestly, this doesn't really mean that much. Most on-ramp providers I use here in the United States just help me on-ramp to USDC. And when I get that USDC, I feel pretty confident. After the passage of the Genius Act, as the rules and regulations get built out, that'll become increasingly true. USDC is from a US publicly traded company. So I can't say I've been looking for an alternative for stablecoins. So as a consumer using blockchain networks, I can't say that I've been looking for a major alternative stablecoin for US dollars. But one of the nice things about there being specific federal law around stablecoins is that I also would have no fear if I caught USAT. I would just be like, okay, it's US dollar stablecoin. In any case, we'll see how things roll out over the next few weeks and months. And if for some reason people get particularly excited about USAT relative to USDC. But in the meantime, the whole theory should be that these are both just stablecoins pegged to the US dollar, regulated by US law. And that's all. That's not that big of a deal.